Well, I'm not doing the Torah portion this week. I'm doing something different because my family told me to. They said, well, we were talking about the crossing the Reed Sea because we were watching, what's it called, that movie? Prince of Egypt. And we were talking about the Reed Sea crossing, and I brought up some stuff that I had seen that has just recently come to light, archaeological stuff. And I was telling them about it, and they were like, oh my God, you should teach us about that, show us, tell us. And I'm like, okay. So I'm not teaching from the Torah portion, I'm teaching from basically the events of Passover week. So we're going to walk through it kind of slowly. And I got lots of pictures and and some video. So we need to turn the lights off. Can we turn the lights off, please? So we are talking about passing through the Reed Sea. And then the Exodus. I think we'll leave these on. And then the Exodus. Oh, maybe we shouldn't. I'll turn these off. So we're talking about passing through the Reed Sea and then the actual Exodus. You guys know how to say Exodus in Hebrew? No, Shemot means names. The name of the book is names. Nobody knows how to say it? There's no way to say Exodus. It's going out. Yitziat. Yitziat just means going out. The going out. Now you know. That's right. Now you do. So, God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Reed Sea. And the sons of Israel went up in fives. Nobody knows what that means. Chamesh. Chameshim. It just means in fives. Well, what they think it means, or what the rabbis say in their opinion that means, and they might be right, is that 1 out of every 6 people were saved. In other words, every 5 people were killed, and only 1 out of 6 was saved. In other words, the other, which is like 7.75, like 3/4 of all of Israel was not redeemed. Do you understand what I'm saying? So out of 6, 5 made it, or sorry, that's not correct. That's not correct. Out of 6, 1 made it. And so they call that fives, like groups of 5. Which means 3/4 of Israel was not redeemed. They stayed in Egypt. Which is why we have in the Haggadah, when we're talking about the 4 sons and it gets to the evil son, what does it say about the evil son? Right, he didn't make it his own going out of Egypt. And if he'd have been there, he would have stayed. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about all the rest of Israel that stayed in Egypt. And 3 million supposedly came out, along with the Gentiles that followed them, to make up like 3 million people. But that wasn't all of Israel. That was just basically a quarter. All right, so they came out by 5s, or in 5s, from the land of Egypt. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones from here with you. Then they set out from Sukkot and camped in Etam on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the derech, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from in front of the people. Now, when they came out, most people, well, let me say it this way. Every single thing about the Bible is wrong. Everything. I'm going to say easily 90% of everything that is taught from the Bible is wrong. Easily 90%. Probably more, but I'm being nice. And every map is wrong, everything on the internet is wrong, every story is wrong, every teaching is wrong, everything. Because it starts with a foundation that doesn't listen to the rabbis. Now, the rabbis have a completely different story on every single doctrine in the Bible. And if you start with that foundation, Everything makes sense in the Bible. So even the route out of Exodus, I mean, for goodness sake, they got a concretized mountain, Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula. It's even named Sinai Peninsula after this fake mountain. It's all wrong. The whole thing is wrong. So you have to repicture the route in your head. You cannot think of the traditional route of coming out of Egypt and understand what's going on. It's a totally different system, totally different direction, and I've got maps to show you how it really was, or at least a couple. So I just want you to understand that everything is wrong. We're going to start with one myth. Now, I just found this, so I haven't done a lot of research on it, so I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to tell you what I think. Now, Yam Suf, the Reed Sea, every map, every teaching, every song, everything says Red Sea, doesn't it? And the map, it says Red Sea. People say Red Sea even today, yeah? Nothing red about it. There's nothing in the Hebrew that supports calling it red in any way, shape, or form. You can't even get close. Here's what Suf means. Here's from Jusinius. I've got the whole thing written here. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But you can see that it just literally means to snatch away or to carry away. That's what Suf means. That's all it means. Now, because of that, it means like to have an end of something. Like you snatch it away, you've ended it. Yes? So here, Suf means to have an end, to have a completion. So maybe Yam Suf is because it's over there and it's the end of the land of Egypt. Except it's not. The land of Egypt encompasses, most people don't know this, the Sinai Peninsula. That's why Israel gave the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt in 1954, I think it was, or 56. We gave Egypt back to Egypt because we'd taken it in war, in the 50-something war. We gave it back in the 70s, I think it was. But we took it in war in the 50s. And we had it for, a couple decades, and then we had to give it back to make peace. Give it back, why? Because it belongs to Egypt. The Sinai Peninsula is not a no man's land, a triangular, big, giant piece of desert that nobody owns. It is biblically Egypt. So, it can't be the end of the land of Egypt because it's right smack in the middle of the land of Egypt, the Yam Suf. So then we have rush, reed, or seaweed. Now, I don't know how you get from to snatch or carry away to weeds or seaweeds, but that's what it is. I don't quite understand that. You got to say it loud if you need to say something. Rush, reed, or seaweed. The etymology is not known. That means the history of the word is not known. So they don't know, so I don't know. How do we get from end, destruction, carry away, snatch away to weed? I don't know, and they don't know, so I'm not going to say I know. It says perhaps it may be of the same origin as the Latin, and then it gives Latin, which I don't understand. So that doesn't help. And then it gives some scripture, and they all say the same thing, seaweed or weed. That doesn't help. It doesn't tell us how we got there. So how do we get from this to Red Sea? Any guesses? They just added an E to red, from reed to red. They took an E out from reed to red. I mean, it could be anybody's guess, except I found one thing that might tell us why. And by the way, every single verse in the Bible says Yam Suf. It never says Yam Edom, which would be Red Sea, or Yam Adam, Red Sea, or any variation. It always says Yam Suf. Now in 1 Kings 9, it says this: Solomon built a fleet of ships at Tzion. Do you all know where Eilat is in Israel? You know where Eilat is? It's right at the mouth of, I'm going to show you a map in a while, right at the northern mouth of the Reed Sea. So you have the Reed Sea that comes way up, right at the mouth, at the Dead Sea, below the Dead Sea. That's Tzion Gever, and it is now Eilat. It's a resort in Israel. You can go snorkeling there, scuba diving. There's really beautiful waters, real clear, beautiful waters. Solomon built a fleet of ships. This doesn't mean 2 ships. This means like 100 ships at Tzion Gever. So that means he was all up and down the Reed Sea. He was in that thing constantly, doing business. He built a fleet of ships at Tzion Gever, which is near Eilat, on the shore of the Reed Sea, the Yam Suf, in the land of Edom, red. I believe that Edom stole the name of this sea. And so that's why they call it the Red Sea. Same thing happened to the Dead Sea, by the way. The Bible never calls it Dead Sea. Do you know what it calls it? Very good. Salt Sea, Yam Malak. It calls it the Salt Sea in the Bible. So where do we get Dead Sea from? The Romans. The Romans. They just changed the name. And so everybody went with it. And I believe the same thing happened here with Edom. So they're basically saying, that's our sea. That's the Edom Sea. It's ours. You get what I'm saying? Now, I can't prove it because I just found this yesterday. But I'm going to do some more research. But I think that's what happened. All right. So here's a map. Let's see. I guess I can do this. Here's the northern end mouth of the Yam Suf. Here's Eilat, or Tzion Gever. All of this is Egypt. That's the Sinai Peninsula. It's all Egypt in the Bible. And it says they came out of Egypt. So if they crossed here, which is where everybody has them crossing the Yam Suf, they're crossing from Egypt into Egypt. Big deal. They have to get out of Egypt. So there is a route. It was an ancient route, an ancient road that went from Egypt to Edom. And that's it there. It goes right across what we call the Sinai Peninsula. And it goes to Eilat, and then it drops down. But God didn't take them up around Eilat. He took them into the worst possible route. You see that word entangled? You see that word entangled? Right here? I'm going to show you a close-up map, and you're going to see why it's called entangled. Now, when I say it's called entangled, I mean the Arabs call it entangled to this day. It's called Wadi Watir. Wadi Watir. Wadi is like an arroyo, a big valley. Watir means entangled, like a mess, like knotted. And it's called that because of what happened to the Jews. So let's go back to the scriptures, Exodus 14, 1 through 12. Yehovah spoke to Moshe, saying, tell the sons of Israel to turn back and camp before Pi Hahirot. Pi means mouth, Hirot means cave or gorge. So there's like a big gorge, and there's a mouth of it. And he says, I want you camped right in front of that gorge, between the tower, Migdol, and the sea. And you shall camp in front of Baal Zephon. Now, Baal Zephon, anybody know where Baal Zephon is? It's not in Egypt. It's in Midian. It's across the sea. So he's telling them exactly where he's going to take them. He's going to take them across the sea, right in front of Baal Zephon, and right here, there is a mouth of a gorge or a cave right after the part that's called entangled. So we know exactly where they ended up. Because, you know what? The Arabs kept all the names. The Jews didn't keep the names, the Arabs kept the names, which is kind of strange, but I'm glad they did, because we know exactly where they were. You shall camp in front of Baal Zephon, opposite, at the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the sons of Israel, they're wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has watir, has entangled them. Watir is Arabic, it's not Hebrew. Has watired them. And he took 600 select chariots, and he chased after the sons of Israel as the sons of Israel were going out with a high hand. They overtook them camping by the sea. As Paro drew near, the sons of Israel, they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel cried out to Jehovah, it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Now that's 12 verses. You can see the ellipses. I've taken a lot out just to show you the appropriate parts. Look at that route. Now you can go on the internet and you can find a video where they drove this route. They drive from Cairo. They go under a tunnel at the Suez Canal, and they come out in the Sinai Peninsula, and they drive this route. And you're like this. It's like spaghetti once you get to Wadi Watir. It's pretty straight until you get there. But once you get to Wadi Watir, it's like scenic drive here. It's just back and forth all over the place. Here's the end of Wadi Watir. This is the very, very end of it. You can see the sea. This is a photograph looking at the sea through the gorge. What's the gorge called? Pi Hahirot. That's the mouth of the gorge. That's the mouth of the cave or the gorge. And guess how wide that gorge is? Anybody know? Now remember, you got 3 million people, we'll say. Well, we'll say 1.5 million, just to be nice. You got 1.5 million people traveling. How wide do you think that gorge is?
5 people wide.
No, not 5 people wide. Good guess, though. Actually, 10 chariots. All right, good guess. Now, they come to Nuweiba Beach. I've told you this before. Nuweiba Beach. In yellow, you can see it here. This is an Arabic map from the 60s or 70s. There's another map that this was almost exactly like from the 1850s. It is almost identical. It says Nuweiba al-Mazira. That's the long form of Nuweiba. Nuweiba's been shortened because it's too much. It's a mouthful. And so they shorten it from Nuweiba al-Muzaira. What does that mean in Arabic? Waters of Moses opening. Isn't that a trip? And that's Arabic. Wow. Waters of Moses opening. Look at the gorge. Look at Pi Hahirot. Now, these cliffs are huge next to Wadi Watir. There's no way over it. You can't get around it. There's only one way, and that's to go through that Wadi Watir. And think about it. You got 1.5 million people, up to 3 million. How are you going to get through there? So this is exactly 1 football field wide, 300 feet wide. That's it, to get all those people through. And then to get 600 choice chariots through. So God's pretty smart. He funnels everything down. And then, now, this has changed after 3,500 years. Don't think it was exactly like this. But it was close. You could get 1.5 million to 3 million people here. This is huge. This beach is enormous. It sticks out over 1.5 miles from here into the sea. It's huge. So that's not a problem. Problem isn't getting them there. Problem is, how do we separate the chariots from the people? Because they're coming to the sea. So I just think this is amazing. I look at this and I think it's amazing. Now there's a lot of stories in the Midrash and the Talmud that talk about this right here. Those mountains. You know what the rabbis say was on those mountains? Demons. In the form of a migdol, a tower. And the demons were like, they looked like animals, but they were like Egyptian animals, like Horus and Nut and stuff like that. They're demons. They looked like that, but they would come alive when a Jew would pass. And so they would keep everybody inside the borders of Egypt. And if a Jew tried to pass the borders, it would be like the invasion of the body snatchers, like that. And they would signal, oh my God, here comes a Jew, you better do something. Very, very strange. There's also a Migdol that's still there, by the way. I believe it's this. They're restoring the ruins of it. It's 3 stories tall, and there was 1,000 troops, Egyptian troops there. So here comes the Jews with 3 million people. There's 1,000 troops of Egypt. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to get ready for battle, and then they're going to freak out and run because they just keep coming and coming and coming and coming. Because remember, it says they went out how? The second one. What did the second one say? They went out how? You didn't catch it? With a high hand. With a high hand. You know what that means? Armed. That means they're like Carlos. Woohoo, baby! And they got weapons. That's what a high hand means. So these, if there were troops there at this Migdol, the one that's on Nueva Beach, they just ran, I'm sure, because the Jews just kept coming and coming and coming. Now, Josephus says about this Pi Hahirot, he says, for there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable. You could not get around it. You could not get any other way except through that pass. Impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight. So that's just some confirmation of how it was. Now, we come to the sea. I read a website that said, Christians foolishly say there's a land bridge at Nueva Beach that goes across to Midian, to Saudi Arabia. So stupid. And then he shows this. That's a land bridge. He shows the evidence and he says it's foolishness. So let me tell you how deep this is. This, it's not like 2 feet deep. It goes down to, I believe, 600 feet deep. This here is 2,500 feet deep. This is 1,700 feet deep. So these have names, these gorges underwater, they have names, I can't remember what they are, but in between them is a literal land bridge that is a 5% grade, very, very gradual, that goes down and then back up, very gradual. But it's underwater, it's deep, up to 700 feet deep. So that's why God had to get rid of the water. Say it again. This is a little above sea level, a little bit. So you can see, I don't know if you can see it, but there's some numbers here. Yeah. Okay, right here at the land bridge, let's see, that is 800 feet deep. This is 800 feet deep. In the middle. At its deepest point. These are feet. These are feet. Yeah. So 800 feet is the depth. That's the deepest part, 800 feet. But the cool thing is, it's not 800 feet from zero. Right. It's 800 feet at a 5-degree slant. 5 degrees is almost nothing. It's like that. Very, very, very gradual. Yeah. You can see it on the elevation, correct. Now, at both beaches, there are pillars set up by Solomon. Some of you know about this. The pillar here at Nueva Beach is still there. The Egyptians left it. They got it from where it was, which I'll tell you about that, and they set it up. They erected it. But the one on the Saudi side, the Saudis found out about it because in 1978, I'll tell you about this. When they found out about it, they immediately got rid of it. But before they got rid of it, it was recorded onto, in many documents in 1978, that this was written on the pillar. And this wasn't done by Saudis. It says Pharaoh, Mitzrayim, Moshe, death, water, Yehovah, Solomon, and Edom. Yeah. Now, the pillars are Phoenician or Israeli in design. They are red granite, solid red granite, not Egyptian, not Midianite. They're Phoenician or Israeli. So everybody believes that Solomon put these up. Why? Because Solomon was there from Tzion Gever up and down that waterway constantly doing business. And with his fleet of ships. And he knew about, obviously, everybody knew about the crossing of the Red Sea here. And so he erected these pillars. Now, it was in 1978 that Ron Wyatt discovered them. The one on the Nueva beach, it wasn't here. It was right in the water, like partially in the water. So it had been pushed over, it had been moved. Maybe Egypt tried to get rid of it, I don't know. But it was laying here in the water. He got it, he pulled it up from the water. It is enormous. I'll show you a picture of it. And it had inscriptions on it, but Egypt took the inscriptions off. They carved the inscriptions off of it. And then they erected it here at Nueva Beach. So here's what that looks like. That's the one on Nueva Beach. Look how big it is. And that is red granite. Now, Egypt got rid of the inscriptions on it that talked about the crossing of the Red Sea, but at least they erected it. So at least we have that. But the one on the Saudi Arabian side, they removed it. And they put a plaque that just says, Red Sea Coastal Survey Society, or something like that. So they put a little round plaque. But what are they called?
They're called
benchmarks.
For navigation.
Okay, cool. Right, so they can figure out the GPS coordinates. Here's the actual pillar before they removed it. And you can see it's got graffiti all over it. That's not the inscriptions, that's graffiti.
They even call it the Red Sea.
Yes, everything calls it the Red Sea. Everything. Everything's wrong. Back to Exodus 14:19 through 20. Now this is what I discovered recently. This just blows me away. I mean, I knew about the real Mount Sinai. I knew about the crossing at Nueva. I've seen a few photographs of what they found underwater. I knew some stuff, but this I knew nothing about, and it just blew me away. The angel of God who had been going before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was cloud along with darkness, yet it gave light at night. Thus the one did not come near the other all night. So where are they all night? The Jews are on the beach at Nueva Beach. Where are the Egyptians? They're in the gorge. They're in Wadi Watir. I don't know how far back that stretched, but it had to go a long way, because there's 600 choice chariots, plus all the troops, plus all the other chariots, plus the horses. So it probably went for miles through that gorge. And in between them is the pillar of fire, right at the mouth. You're going to love this. The whole beach is fused. The whole beach, not part of it. The entirety of the beach where it hits the water, or right in front of the water, is completely fused. This is fused, all of it. Even these big rocks are fused into the beach.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
To me, like the heat of the pillar of fire fused
That's exactly right.
But it didn't hurt the people as it did.
That's exactly right. The pillar of fire, I mean, think about, where are the Jews? They're on the beach. And the pillar of fire is right there with them and doesn't hurt any Jews and gives them light. Thank you for the light, Lord. and yet, it's keeping everybody at bay. It's keeping the Egyptians at bay. It's just amazing. Baruch Hashem. This is, something to praise God for. Yeah?
I bet the Egyptians felt the heat of it.
I'll bet you the Egyptians still feel the heat of it. They do not know what to do with this. I didn't hear what you said. It's like Daniel chapter 2. That they went into the oven and exactly right. Yeah, Mishael, no, hold on. Mishael, Azariah, and Hananiah were in the furnace, which is not a furnace, it's a room this size, that's a kiln that cooks pottery and stuff, and they heated it 7 times more than normal, and it killed the people who threw the people in, that got close to the mouth. It killed them, but these guys were fine. And it's the same thing as when the Jews were in Goshen, and they had light, right? And the Jews and the Egyptians had no light, just darkness. Same picture.
That warfare, they call it glassing. When you glass an area, that means you're basically destroying it.
It's called glassing,
Glassing.
like you just bomb it
Yeah.
and just fuse everything.
Glass the ground.
Well, that's what God did. He glassed it. That's exactly right.
Over the sand.
Exactly right. So, back to Exodus 14:21. Then Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land. So remember, it's got to be deep for God to get that water parted, but it's not so deep that they can't get across. Turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were divided. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on the dry land, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and their left. Now, I love this. I love it. I've always loved this. Ever since I started liking Jell-O. When I was a kid, I hated Jell-O. And then I got a little older, and I was in my teens and early 20, around 20. And I just didn't like Jell-O. I didn't like the feel of it. I didn't like, you're going to put that in your mouth. Then, I didn't like it. But then I read this, and I tried it, and I was like, ooh, that's pretty good. This changed my mind about Jell-O, and here's why. Here's why. Also, my favorite thing is feta cheese. This is also about feta cheese. So, it says that the waters were a wall to them on their right and their left. It's not like in the movies. I mean, we were watching that movie. What's the movie again? Prince of Egypt. It's not like that. And it's not like the 10 Commandments, I'm sorry to tell you. Because it was different. And the Hebrew will show you the difference. Exodus 15:8 says, "At the blast of your nostrils, the waters stood up like a water spout." Like a water spout, like spout on a water bottle. It stands up. The deeps were congealed in the heart of the sea. Congealed. So I looked up this word, and I'm like, well, like Jell-O. It's like Jell-O. Nitzvu, they stood up, and by the way, why doesn't this say they commanded? Because it's the word tzava. That people mistranslate command, it's the same word. Tzava, nitzav, standing one. Nitzavim, standing ones, the Torah portion that we read, nitzavim. You are all here standing today. Not commanding, standing here today, right? So, nitzvu, they stood up, the waters. Nizlim, that means the ones flowing. Kafu, that's congealed. And it also means curdled, like feta cheese. Curdled or congealed. Now the word is kafa. Don't think kippah. It's a different word. Kafa, to contract oneself, to shrink in, to draw oneself together, to congeal, to curdle, as it says milk, but it's not milk. It's yogurt or feta cheese, the way it curdles. Zechariah 14:6. I love this verse. In that day there will be no light. In that day, in the day of the Lord, there will be no light. Why? Because the luminaries, the glorious ones, they'll shrink. They'll pull themselves in. There will be no light because the glorious ones will contract or congeal or shrink. Job 10:9-10. This is a good verse. Remember that you've made me as clay. What are you going to do? Return me to dust again? Didn't you pour me out like milk and then curdle me like cheese? That's the same word. To curdle or to congeal. Like feta cheese. I guess you could say other cheeses too. They also curdle, right? With the retin. So, it's not like in the movies. It's like Jell-O. It's like Jell-O. Like you can see through it. You can see the stuff in it, but everything's frozen animation. It just stops because everything is congealed. And yet, the animals keep living. Now, let's talk about going into the sea. This is really an important concept. It really is. I know that you have wondered why God doesn't do something for you. I know you do. Come on, God, come on. Why? Why are you waiting? Come on, do it already. Do it. We all feel like this all the time. The same thing happened when Moshe split the sea. It wasn't like in the movies. He stands up on the rock and he goes, I command you to part, or whatever, It's not like that. There was a big argument between the tribes. A big argument. They're stoning each other, it says, in the Midrash. They picked up rocks and they're stoning each other because they're all terrified to get in that water. Now, Moshe hasn't said, part, O sea, yet, with his Charlton Heston voice. So they don't know what to do. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on dry land. That's all it says. Sounds like real simple, right? No. And the waters were a wall to them on their right and their left. Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Meir, before I read this, I want you to understand, this is a huge, huge concept in Judaism. One year I was doing some work for the Jewish Federation, illustrating a big, like a brochure for a conference that they were having here in El Paso. And it was a Jewish conference for the Jewish community. And the whole illustration and all the artwork and the logo and everything came from this story about Nachshon going into the water when nobody else would. And that's what the whole meaning of the conference was. It was like, get off your butt and do something. That's what the message of the conference was. And so all the artwork and the speakers and everything came from this huge story in Judaism. This is just one little snippet from many, many, many parts of the Talmud. This is from Talmud Sota. Sota is the waters of bitterness for the woman caught in adultery. Rabbi Yehuda said to Rabbi Meir, that's not how it happened, buddy. That's how this starts. Rather, this tribe said, I'm not going into the sea first. And that tribe said, I'm not going in. Then in jumped the prince of Judah, Nachshon ben Aminadab. He was the leader of the tribe of Judah, and descended into the sea first, accompanied by his entire tribe. As it is stated, Ephraim surrounds me with lies, and the house of Israel with deceit, and Judah is still wayward toward God, but the word wayward, it is Ram im el. Rad im el. So, that's in Hosea 12, but they see it this way, which is interpreted homiletically, in other words, as a picture, as a parable, as Judah descended, Rad im el, with God. He descended with God. Isn't that cool? For this reason, because Nachshon and the tribe of Judah went into the sea first, the tribe of Judah merited to govern Israel. That's how big this is. Judah became his sanctuary, Israel his dominion. The sea saw it, that Judah was the head, of the dominion of God, the kingdom of God, and he ran away. Isn't that beautiful? That's only one out of many, many, many stories about this. Nachshon ben Abinadab. You guys know who that is? He's the one who started with Aaron the mixing of Judah and Levi so that the Messiah could be the priest king. Because Aaron married the sister of Nachshon ben Abinadab. And God specifically said, do not intermarry the tribes, right? And so right after that, what does Aaron do? He goes and he marries a daughter of Judah. And that produced the line of the Messiah. So that Messiah could be from both tribes of Levi and Judah to be the priest king. All right. Exodus 14:23. Then the Egyptians took up the pursuit, and all of Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, his horsemen went in after them into the midst of the sea. At the morning watch, Yehovah looked down on the army of Egypt through the pillar of fire and cloud, and brought the army of Egypt into confusion. He corrected or disciplined. Now maybe, I know your translation doesn't say that. It probably says he made the chariot wheels swerve. Not what it says in Hebrew. It says he disciplined or corrected or spanked the chariot wheels, and he made them drive heavy with difficulty. Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea. That's when Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea. Returned it to its normal state at daybreak, while the Egyptians were fleeing right into it. Then Jehovah cast Egypt into the midst of the sea. He cast them like picking up a rock and throwing it into the sea. He picked up Egypt and he threw them into the water. You ever see that? That's how I want you to picture it. He picks up Egypt, all of them, and just throws them into the water. Because that's what it says in Hebrew. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even Pharaoh's entire army that had gone into the sea after them. Not any of them remained. So they're on Nueba Beach. Nachshon says, man, I'm going in. He goes, and as soon as he goes in, all of Judah goes in, and then everybody else does. And that's when Moshe lifts up the staff and says, part, sea, and then the sea parts. They get to the other side at daybreak. He lifts up his hand again, and that's exactly when Egypt is picked up. God throws them in, and he says, okay, you're done. And he covers them with water. And this is what's been found. At Nueba Beach and on the other side, across from Nueba Beach, on the Saudi Arabian side, this is what they've found. These are chariot wheels. This, I did not believe it. I didn't believe it. I thought that's been photoshopped. I don't believe it. It's too clear. It's too crisp. It's gold. It's a golden chariot wheel. And I'm thinking, no way. There's no way that could be preserved that good after all these years. 3,500 years. That's a lie. It's photoshopped. So then I saw it on film, and I was like, okay, it's for real. That one over on the left, on your right top, that's a chariot wheel sticking up with the spokes around it, and the coral has attached. Does coral attach to sand? Anybody know? Absolutely not. It has to have something living to eat. So it can only attach itself to wood or to dead animals or something. It's got to be something living for it to attach to. It can't even attach to rocks. Did you know that?
Isn't that how a reef is formed?
It's formed by dead animals and things, and the coral attaches itself to living things. I always thought it was rocks and stuff like that. It's not. There has to be something living. Well, wood is one of the things it attaches itself to. Here's some more. So somehow, well, I guess, actually, this would have been easier, not harder. Sorry about that. This would have been easier, not harder, for it to end up like this, because the chariot's underneath it. And the spoke is just, the wheel's just sticking up from the chariot. There's a chariot underneath there. And that's just the wheel sticking up. Here's one where the wheel has been completely detached from the chariot, and it's got the chariot wheel sitting on the floor, and then the axle sticking up. Are you ready? So I'm thinking that if they had the right equipment and they did an expedition down into this gorge, I bet they're going to find 1,000 chariot wheels and horse bones and human bones and everything else, and here too. I don't know which way the tides would go, but they're not just going to stay there for 3,500 years. But they found some in that crossover space.
Yeah, back in those days, the swords were made of bronze, so we still got a lot of bronze involved.
That's right. The swords and the weapons were made of bronze, and so I suspect they're going to find a lot of that too. So I want to talk about this concept of casting them into the sea, because this is important. Ben Azai said, everything is judged according to the principle of midan keneged midan. Say midan, keneged midan. Midan means from judge or judgment. Keneged is equal to judgment. Judgment equal to judgment. So everything is done by God, measure for measure. Listen to me. Everything is done by God, measure for measure. Everything. So we don't like something that's happening to us? I guess it's payback, because we did it to somebody else. I guess, because everything's measure for measure. Just as the Egyptians were proud, and they cast the male children. Where did they cast the male children? Into the Nile. So God did the same thing to them. Right back at you, right. And he throws them into the water. He cast them into the sea. As it is said, I will sing unto the Lord, because he's triumphantly. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea. He's thrown them into the sea. Isn't that awesome? It's not like they just were there and then the chariot wheels fell off. Oh no! God threw them in. And this is a prophecy of the day of the Lord. It's very important. Because same thing's going to happen to Babylon. Same exact thing's going to happen to Babylon. Just like God picked them up like a rock and threw them in the water, God's going to pick up Babylon, which is basically the entire world system, and throw it into the sea. Jeremiah 51 says this. So, and by the way, Jeremiah 48, 49, 50, 51, and 52 all talk about the destruction of Babylon. 5 chapters at the end of Jeremiah. So Jeremiah wrote in a single scroll all the evil which would come upon Babylon. All these words which have been written. And as soon as you finish writing the scroll, tie a stone to it and throw it into the middle of the Euphrates and say, just so shall Babylon sink down and not rise again, because of the calamity that I'm going to bring on her. Now, it says about 5 times in those 5 chapters, in that day, or day of the Lord. And so we have it repeated in Revelation, which is in the day of the Lord. Revelation 18:21 through something that I didn't put. Then a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea. Now, he told Jeremiah, take that scroll that you wrote, and I guess it had to have been pretty big, and wrap it around a stone and throw it into the middle of the Euphrates. You know how big the Euphrates is? Anybody know how big the Euphrates is? How big? A football field is 300 feet. What do you?
You need a boat to cross either.
You definitely need a boat to get across.
Couple miles, probably.
It's a little less than a mile across at some places. Some places it's like 300 feet, but that's the skinniest. So he tells him, wrap that scroll in a stone and throw it into the middle of the Euphrates. And this is a picture of the angel taking all the things that have been written in heaven and putting it on a stone. Who do you think that is? That's the Messiah. And throwing it into the middle of the sea. So he says, take up a great millstone. You know what a millstone is?
Yeah.
Those big giant stones that big that grind wheat and stuff like that. Flour. It's huge. So the angel picks up a huge millstone and throws it into the sea, saying, just so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will not be found any longer. The light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer. Your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the Gentiles were deceived by your sorcery, and in her was found all the blood of the prophets and all the holy ones, the blood of all the holy ones, and of all who've been slain on the earth. So, the destruction of Egypt is a picture, I showed you this a few weeks ago, is a picture of the destruction of the world and the evil system of the world in the day of the Lord. Yeah? Yes.
It's Revelation 18, 21 and 24.
Thank you. 21 through 24. Very good.
So that's being thrown into the midst of the sea, being the Gentiles, right?
Yes, the sea is the Gentiles. So we pass through the midst of the sea, the midst of the Gentiles, to salvation. And the same thing is going to happen in the day of the Lord. Same exact thing. Get those tambourines. Get those tambourines. Let's stand.
By Gili Yeshua.
Vayil Yeshua, Yeshua, Aziva Zimranya, Aziva Zimranya, Vayil Yeshua, Yeshua, Aziva Zimranya, Aziva Zimranya, Vayil Yeshua, Yeshua, Vayil Yeshua, Yeshua, Vayil Yeshua, Yeshua. Let's stay standing for the Aleinu. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו ככל המונם. Let us adore the Lord of all, who in greatness created the world from of old, that he has not made us like the nations of the earth, not made us like the families of the land. He's not made our destiny like theirs, and not cast our lot with all of them. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. And it is said, the Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. Va'anachnu korim umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malachei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. And we bend the knee and bow in worship and give thanks to the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed is he. We acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. There is nothing but him. As Torah says, know that the Lord, he is God, in the heavens above and on the earth beneath. Ein od milvado. There is nothing else but him. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Let's do Kiddush.